they're not very smart, or they're greedy, or they're blinded by money, or something. I don't know what the problem is. They got a problem, though. They got a problem because they don't realize that if you don't stop this train, you're going to go over that cliff into that canyon, and you're going to die. And you're going to take all of your political aspirations with you when you do die. So that's the choice the people have. Are you going to wake up to this threat? You're going to deal with it. Basically, the equivalent of throwing on the brakes and stopping this train, or are you going to die? So I choose, I guess. I mean, now is the moment of choice. Well, the wealthy, they actually can choose for everybody. Why? Because they are the ones who run the financial markets. They are the ones who manage the oil, energy markets, and all this kind of stuff. The elites, the wealthy, can bring this system down anytime they want to, essentially apply the brakes. Anytime they want to. They are actually able to do that by themselves. They don't need us, our permission, our vote, our consent, none of it. And that, of course, has been my expectation, my actual expectation for about 2 years now, is that any day now, they're going to put the brakes on. And I think they're realize that that's going to be extremely disruptive. It's going to be challenging to make a profit, which is what they care about, making money. It's going to be challenging to make a profit. It's going to be challenging to stay alive, which is a different problem. Less of a problem for them, but more of a problem for us, the hoi polloi. Now, the hoi polloi, they don't need us, storming the Bastille and dragging out the guillotines. But as long as we don't do that, they need us. Because they need us to buy those $5 lattes at the Starbucks drive-in, and so on and so forth, and $300 sneakers and trips to Cancun, and they need us to do that.
Restaurants.
Yeah, by eating at restaurants. They need us to do that because that's how they make money.
All for the workers, the essential workers.
I don't want to talk about the essential workers.
Right.
The essential workers are done. Okay, you just need to get that into your head. This whole thing that there are some people whose labor is really, really important. That's done.
Because they're vulnerable to disease, right?
Yes, and the wealthy have decided that, and now they're going to very, very quickly carry out a process they've actually been doing slowly for about 20 years now, which is automating everything.
There's that too, right? Okay.
Jeff Bezos is getting a black eye from how he treats his people in his distribution warehouses. Well, I happen to know for a fact that Jeff Bezos, his company, are working on automating those facilities. So all he has to do is get through this rough spot for him, and then pretty soon there's not going to be any humans in his facilities, essential or otherwise, minimum wage or otherwise.
And that's why you got a universal basic income, right?
Yeah, well, whatever. That's not going to happen.
No?
So the only people, I mean, it should happen, but it's not going to happen. So the only people
will die, right?
So what? I mean, no one cares if you die.
Right.
It's up to you to not die. And if you don't have enough wealth to not die, then your destiny is to die. Because right now, it's looking to me like increasingly likely that the world is going to belong to the wealthy, the current crop of elites. They're going to inherit the world. It's not going to be like they say in the Bible, where the meek inherit the earth. No, that's not how it's going to be. The wealthy and the powerful are going to inherit the earth, which is what everyone expected to have happen when it happened. They're going to automate everything. They've been working hard on it, and the people who do that work are asking themselves, well, if you're going to automate my work, what am I going to do? They don't care. And they're going to automate everything, and they're going to have all their shiny things, including their latte at Starbucks. And everybody else is going to be, I don't know, living in the wilds, or not living at all.
Right, or, figuring it out, another way of living.
Yes, figuring out another way to live. That you do have that. You do have agency in that regard.
Right.
So what does that look like? So
yeah,
my actual expectation is that the elites are not going to work with us on this. They are going to cut it off. It being fossil fuels. They want to save the planet for themselves. They like skiing. in the Swiss Alps, and they need snow and glaciers in the Swiss Alps. And do they want all the ice on the planet to melt? No. Quick answer, no, they do not. Do they want sea level to rise and inundate Venice? No, they like Venice. They like going there once a summer and enjoying the Venice and being rowed around in the boats and all the things in the waterways of Venice. And they want to go back to Venice. They don't want to lose Venice. Venice has been there for 1900 years. Fine. They'll save Venice. But to do that, they have to stop the fossil fuel emissions. Actually, they're probably going to lose Venice anyway. But anyway, they don't want to lose anything else, right? They don't want to lose the waterfront in Paris. And that, there's a lot of things they don't want to lose. So they're going to put a stop to this. I don't know how they're going to do it. I could certainly come up with a bunch of scenarios how they might do it, but it doesn't really matter. There's a bunch of scenarios how they could do it, and they need to do it. Therefore, they will. Then the actual details don't matter.
But we have to get prepared.
So when they do that, then the people who have been dependent on fossil fuels for, well, everything, are not going to have those. And if it's impossible to imagine, well, okay, fine, you have my sympathies. Yes, it's a different world without fossil fuels. How am I going to get to my work? You won't. Then how am I going to have money, to buy my things? You won't. So how will I feed myself? Well, the first answer is you won't. But on the other hand, you could feed yourself. That is something you could do. You can't get money for yourself. That actually is in your wheelhouse.
Right.
People have agency to feed themselves.
Right.
Now, this is a very, very old story.
Right.
It's the story of the rise of civilization over, I don't know, what's it been now? 20,000 years, okay? So if you need to go back and, study your ancient history, how did they do it? How did they get to where we are today? Well, then that might be something you want to look into.
Right.
Because that's going to be our story going forward. Now, we're not going to go forward like, bootless Greeks, tilling the soil with sharp sticks, but we can, but we're going to have to feed ourselves. So,
Bootless Greeks with, what was that with?
Although let's not downplay the importance of a sharp stick in gardening. All right, so you're going to have to adjust your expectations.
Right.
That's how you start. You adjust your expectations. So during the pandemic, we've been hearing people say things like, oh, if I can't travel, I'll die. If I can't go shopping, I'll die. Okay, well, if that's true, then those people need to die. Okay, let's get rid of them first. They're addicted. They have problems. They're psychologically unstable.
They can't think outside the box.
They can't think outside the box. Whatever their problem is, they are self-proclaimed, I'm going to die if I can't do these things. Okay, well,
if I don't have a job, I will die.
Then we need to get rid of them first. Help them ease them out of this world into the next life. And be as humane as we can be about that. And then the rest of us who can contemplate life without
a job,
without a $5 latte every morning,
and a job
and a commute. Okay, those of us who can contemplate that life, we then have a different set of challenges. So we are going to need to feed ourselves. We're also going to need to house and clothe ourselves. We're going to need to water ourselves, meaning
collect water,
not just drinking water and water to wash our laundry, but also irrigation, because now we're going to be growing food. So the story is going to be the same as it was for the 20,000 years that came before. You're going to have human habitation where you have the right combination of the following. Water. Water comes first. Arable land. Temperate climate. We don't do well where there's huge swings of daily temperature or huge swings of just winter to summer, okay? A lot of the northern peoples who did well up in the ice, they were by and large hunters. They ate animals. Well, we're not going to have animals to eat. We're now in the opening days of the sixth mass extinction. We're also at a point where 96% of the biomass on Earth is a combination of biomass, animal mass is a combination of humans, their pets, and their livestock. None, so are you going, well, okay, livestock we would eat, but the livestock is only that abundant because of fossil fuels.
Right.
We're feeding them grain, and we're housing them in warehouses with artificial light and all the temperature control and all this kind of stuff. So in the rundown of fossil fuels, a lot of that big ag, modern agriculture, is going to fail. So so if you do live in the north, unless you can raise your own cattle and sheep and whatnot, you're going to starve. You're going to starve. Because the animals that you used to hunt are gone by and large. Gone. They're gone. So people that live in the cold air of the north are going to find themselves in trouble for calories, just for calories, without fossil fuels. And so it goes. Southern California is going to be in big trouble. They don't have water. Their land is good, but only with copious, and I mean like mind-numbing amounts of irrigation. All of which is, transited through enormous pipelines, huge expenditures of energy. I heard the number once of how much of California's electricity, statewide electricity, actually goes to just pumping water. It's huge. You'd be shocked. Well, that's going to stop, right? You can't have that much copious electricity just to pump water when people aren't going to have it to air condition their homes. Because a lot of electricity, even with all the advances in alternative energy, a lot of our electricity still comes from natural gas, and that's a fossil fuel, and that's one of the things that's going to have to be phased out. And maybe the elites will, cut us some slack. Maybe they'll say, all right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut back on fuel stocks for things like aviation, but we'll allow for the continuity of electricity generation. Maybe they'll allow for that. I don't know. Maybe they'll figure it out. But they're not elected representatives. They're not really in a position to tell us what to do or how to count cabbage. So I wonder if they're going to bother trying to nuance this. It could be that they simply shut it all down. And ways they can shut it down, they can have a war, right? A war in the Middle East to do it. But they can also just organize countries to agree to a huge price on carbon. It's not a carbon tax. It would be a fee. It would be a cleanup fee. So the same way you pay to rent a campground because someone has to come in, later in the week and haul your garbage out, right? Or haul fresh water into the campground, or haul the waste out of the porta potty. But a cleanup fee, right? That's why you pay money for a campground. You have to pay for all the maintenance. So in the same way that people have to pay a fee to use a campground, you're going to have to pay a fee to use a fossil fuel. And the fee has to be huge because removing the CO2 from the atmosphere, cleaning up, removing the CO2 from the atmosphere right now is not feasible. I won't say it's impossible because technically it's possible, but it doesn't scale. It's not done at scale. We released 51 billion tons of CO2 into the atmosphere last year. 51.
51
up
billion.
Significantly from years prior.
Also
okay?
called 51 gigatons.
51 gigatons, okay?
Same thing, billion.
51 billion of anything is a lot.
Oh, don't forget
51 billion tons
is 2,000 pounds.
is almost unthinkable.
So it's a number
right?
you'd have to say 2,000 times 51 billion to know how many gallons.
Keeping the math simple, right? 51 billion tons of anything. I mean, if you removed that much CO2 and you formed it into bricks, which is what you'd have to do, it has to be some kind of a solid that you can stack them up and store them. If you remove that much billion tons of it, got another problem. Where are you going to put it? I guess you could use it as building material. If you really did make bricks and they really were architecturally feasible. You can build things with it. You can build roads. You can build walls. They're not so fragile they fall apart. So let's say we make bricks out of this stuff. Okay, but 51 billion tons of brick. That's a whole new way to build things. Do we even know how to build things with bricks anymore? Will they be earthquake proof? Will they stand up to the ages? Or will they just fall down the first time a big truck goes down the street? I don't know. So there's a lot of changes we have to make. But we cannot currently remove CO2 from the atmosphere and make it into bricks. Okay. Technically, yes, you can do it. But, it costs, the actual cost. The cost per brick is something like $10,000 or something. Now, imagine that, they scale that somehow, right? Economies of scale. Maybe they get another $10 a brick. But that's still more than the $2 a brick I pay for clay bricks down at the Home Depot, right? So who's going to buy this stuff? What are you going to do with it? Who cares? Who's going to pay to make these things? Well, of course, the elites are hoping that taxpayers pay for it. That's why they're making such a big fuss about carbon removal and sequestration. And, okay, you could say, well, yeah, trees. Okay, fine, trees. Now, digging up our ancient forests. They first go in and they clear the current forest on the mountains. So that so many millions of tons, thousands of tons of carbon. Then they remove the dirt and they remove all the ancient forests that used to grow on that same mountain. They'll remove forests 100 forests deep, burn that fuel and launch it into the atmosphere. But you can only plant one forest on that ground. So you come back and you plant one forest on that ground and it removes some CO2, and now you have CO2 in trees. What about the other 99 forests that were actually buried? And you dug them up and released them in the atmosphere. Where are those trees going to be planted? And you hear people say, oh, well, we just need to plant 1 trillion trees. That's all, 1 trillion trees a year. Okay? 1 trillion trees a year. And where are you going to plant 1 trillion trees ever? And then where are you going to plant them again next year? Were you going to cut the old trees down and plant new ones where the old ones were? What are you going to do? What are we talking about here? You throw these numbers out like, oh, well, we'll just do this and that. It's like, what? How? Where? Who? Who's going to pay for this? So there's all these imaginary solutions or proposed solutions or technically feasible solutions. I mean, like solutions that don't violate the laws of physics. So they're technically feasible. They're not perpetual motion machines, so they're technically feasible. But no one knows how to do this. Actually, for real, truly do this.
Truly.
Yeah. You don't know. Or who's going to pay for it? Where the energy is going to come from? So yeah, it costs $10,000 to make a brick of, 5-pound brick of hardened CO2 or whatever it actually costs. Who's going to pay for that? Who's going to build that plant? Who's going to run that plant? Where's the energy going to come from to run that plant? Let's see, energy. Well, we get that from burning coal and fossil fuels. Wait, but that's what we're trying to ameliorate, that exact problem. You're burning coal to generate electricity. Now you're going to burn more coal to generate more electricity just to pull the carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere from the coal you burned? Really? Okay, wait. When you're in a hole, you're supposed to stop digging, right?
And that's exactly the answer.
When you're deep in a hole, you're supposed to stop digging. So that's why there's not going to be these kinds of technical gee whiz solutions. It's just going to stop. Just stop.
Stop digging.
Just going to have to stop. And there's no easy way to do that. There's no easy way to stop. There's no easy way to stop. There's no painless way to stop. There's no life-affirming way to stop. There's no beautiful way to stop. Stopping is going to be ugly and brutal. Stopping is going to be disruptive. It's going to cause global wars. It's going to cause massive disruption of populations, generating huge migrations of humans out of different areas into others. It's going to destroy national borders. Entire nations will be overrun as soon as we stop. That's just how it's going to be. That's what happens when you stop doing something that's been supporting you. Before we got our hands into fossil fuels in a big way, we were maybe 300 million people, 400 million people on Earth, okay, and had been for a long time. We've been at that population level for many thousands of years. 2, 3, maybe 400 million. Not really. 200 or 300 million people across the entire planet. Now we're at 8,000 million, or approaching that.
So otherwise known as 8 billion.
8,000 million is 8 billion.
So we went from
We went from say maybe 250 million people to 8,000 million people.
8,000.
And the difference is what made that happen. And people all have kinds of theories on how that happened. But it is absolutely coincident with the rise in the utilization of fossil fuels. And you could say, well, that's fine that it's coincident, but do you have a mechanism for that? Can you explain that coincidence? Oh, yes, absolutely. I can. Very, very simple. We use fossil fuels to reduce infant mortality, vaccines, hospitalization, education, improvements in sanitation, modern water processing, modern sewer treatment plants. We
shipping food all over the country.
We use fossil fuels to completely revolutionize agriculture.
And shipping food all over the world.
And that by itself is many points. Fossil fuels enter the agriculture cycle at every phase. Okay, we can turn land that's not suitable for farming, non-arable land, into arable land by throwing massive amounts of water, fertilizer, mechanical processing of the soil, plowing, if you rather. All of this made possible with fossil fuels. If you've seen what happens in pesticides, and then we have these huge fields in the middle of nowhere, right? No one lives there. They're not near a city. They're just gigantic fields in the middle of nowhere. And then we harvest and there's no people around. Well, we don't need people, right? Because we have fossil fuels to do our harvesting for us. So we roll out these gigantic combines and other types of machinery. We harvest the stuff. It goes into 18-wheeler trucks, then drive it all over the planet, or certainly all over the continent. And if we want to send that food to some foreign buyer, we just put it on a great big huge container ship. Use fossil fuels to sail across the seas. And then on their end, they put it on more trucks and drive it around their countryside, right? And then we're processing this food in new and novel ways. Almost nobody today eats any food that hasn't been processed. Minimal processing is things like you eat your oats, you roll them first, rolled oats, right? What we call oatmeal. You roll your oats. So that's minimal processing. It's just a set of rollers and you smush the oats. I like to eat steel cut oats. I got some in the pot over here I should be eating. They go through a different kind of machine. They get cut up into little bits and then you cook them in a pot. Almost nobody eats food unprocessed. Now, I made a whole bowl of pomelo here. This is 3 pomelos. Again, minimal processing, right? You peel them, cut them up with a knife, pull off all the husks. It takes about half an hour, but it's really good, right? But anyway, so you can eat fruits and vegetables with minimal processing. If you grow greens in your backyard, if you have a citrus tree or something, or an avocado tree, minimal processing. But almost nobody does that. And it's debatable whether an avocado that came from Honduras is minimally processed. It was picked, but then it was packed in a box, and it was wrapped up with a bunch of other boxes in a container, and the container went on a container ship or within an airplane, and it got sent to your continent, and then it got pushed onto another truck, and it got distributed, and it got a little sticker put on it with a barcode, and it got handled into all these stores. Maybe the avocado itself never got cut or sliced or diced or anything else, but I wouldn't call that minimal processing. That's a huge amount of processing
coming from Mexico
to get it to you from Mexico or Honduras or Panama, wherever. So almost nobody eats food that's unprocessed.
Right.
You have the potential to eat unprocessed food if you grew it in your garden or your orchard.
Right.
But other than that, it's really out of reach of most people. And yet that's what we have to now do. We have to get to this point where our food is unprocessed, because the processing, which is reliant on fossil fuels, isn't going to be possible. That's just
right.
And your wheat and your corn and your soybeans and things that come from these gigantic inland farms in the middle of the Midwest, where even the water is transported 1,000 miles just to get to the field.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's just not going to happen.
Oh, even I was thinking
What are you going to
the
do?
making of the fake burger meat. That's a lot of processing, even to create the fake burger meat, when you can just eat rice and beans, right? You don't have to have something that looks like a burger, right?
Well, you do it for Jeff Bezos.
Well, or you mean, well, if you're an American, because we're so used to just eating burgers on a piece of bread, and our only vegetable is maybe the lettuce or tomato that's between it, So yeah, we've got our patterns, and right. But like Kat's saying, that's a lot of processing. That these plants that Bill Gates is supporting, the Impossible Burger, there's a lot of resources to create a burger, right? When we could just eat rice and beans for our protein.
Well, but people like their lifestyles. They don't want to change.
That's true.
And I think the truth is there's going to be a lot of people who don't want it are going to fight it. So I expect massive, massive conflicts in places like the United States, the UK. People just refuse. They have their perception of their rights, and they have a right to not change.
Their cars, their cows, and their, what was the last thing? Country. Oh yeah, their country.
Not even that's like a false framing. Your country is a construct, and it only works if it's sustainable. There are lots of countries that have gone away, and you're not going to keep your country by saying, I'm going to fight for my country. No, you either work for your country or you can't have one, okay? It's not something that's just a document. It's the effort of a lot of people every day trying to keep that thing working.
Well, and if we always talk about climate change, which we're trying to do, it's very easy to get distracted with all the...
Why does talking about climate change make a difference?
Well, I wanted to say something because, bringing it back around, even the concept of our country, which is a big issue with the Donald Trump, that the immigration. Well, the reason why we're having so much immigration and people fleeing to come to America is because we have destroyed their country. That's what's happening in Honduras. And, they got destroyed from the hurricanes and the 150-mile-an-hour winds. And they're
okay. So now this is what people ask: how do you connect the two statements? We destroyed their country,
right?
And their country was destroyed.
Well, because of our fossil fuel building, we have intensified the hurricanes. We have heated the oceans. The oceans are heating, and we're seeing that ocean heating coming from what we were just looking at last night. Is the issue with the melting of the ice, what is it? Icebergs, melting of the icebergs. And so we're heating the water, and this was ice under the water.
Okay, we are heating the water. We are pumping CO2 into the atmosphere,
right,
that is causing global heating.
Right.
A lot of the heat goes into the ocean.
I think like 80% of it or something captured in the ocean, right? Because the water has a low specific heat, or so it has a real ability to absorb heat.
No, quite the opposite.
Very
high specific heat.
Meaning
they can hold a lot of heat.
Where air cannot.
That's right.
As much. Water is so dense.
Yes.
It has the ability to hold so much
the density,
heat.
It's actually the chemical structure of the water molecule allows it to hold a lot of heat.
The chemical structure of the water molecule. Okay.
Water molecules are special.
Yeah. Well, they're so heavy. They're an amazing. They're the most amazing thing. Water. Water is amazing.
Yes.
And so it holds a lot of heat. That's the science. And so 80% of the heat that we're generating from the burning of fossil fuels that puts off carbon dioxide, which is a heat trapping gas, we have a lot of problems. And then we have our animal husbandry is creating a lot of methane for raising so much livestock. And their waste product is methane, right, or something, right? They're
Livestock?
yeah.
Well, it depends on the livestock you're talking about, but yeah, they have waste products.
It puts out methane, right? That's the waste product that they breathe, that they release in their from their digestive system,
Yes.
right? The waste, even our wastes are I guess all wastes of an animal are methane, or the plants even put out methane when they degrade, right, or something. Is that true with our compost?
Well, okay, so the waste thing is complicated. It's not as simple as you think it is.
What are you looking
In
for?
fact, I was looking for my
Handkerchief?
nose rag.
Oh, here it is.
It's true that cows belch a lot of methane, but cows eat grass, and the methane comes from whatever they eat.
So it's the rotting of the vegetables.
So it's not a big deal. Where it comes to the big deal is that the cows are really fed a lot of fossil fuels, because the food they eat comes from modern agriculture, which is dominated by fossil fuel inputs. So even though your cow is eating grains and grasses, which are theoretically carbon neutral, and they don't contribute to global heating, the fact that the agriculture system that is nurturing them is heavily dependent on fossil fuels means that the cows are dependent on fossil fuels.
But what it is in their natural processes, their waste, well, I guess it's the farts and the burps that are putting out, mostly the burps actually, are putting out methane from their digestion of the grasses that have taken in the CO2.
I need to make an important point with you.
Okay.
Now, I know you're vegan, and I don't have a problem with you being vegan.
I see, but
I'm trying to make some sense out of this for you. If you got rid of all the cattle on the planet,
right,
you wouldn't solve your problem.
Okay. No.
No, because they are not the problem. The problem is the fossil fuels taken out of the ground. If you could raise cattle and sheep and pigs and everything else without fossil fuels, then they're fine.
Okay.
You could even eat them. It's fine because they're carbon neutral. They're part of the biosphere.
Okay.
They are part of the carbon cycle. Where we go off the rails is when we dig fossil fuels out of the ground and use them in the carbon cycle. That's the only thing that's really providing friction here, is the removal of the fossil fuels from the ground deep in the earth. And they're doing this with huge equipment. They're having to dig so deep and releasing it into the atmosphere where it's not in the ground anymore.
I see. And that is the CO2.
Yes, and one of the ways we do that,
right?
We have many industries. We have thousands of industrial segments that use fossil fuels, directly or indirectly. Cattle are one of the industry segments. Livestock, meat production, is one of the industry segments that use fossil fuels indirectly. We don't feed them coal or crude oil. We feed them plants that are raised and transported using coal and crude oil. Transportation, though, is largely fossil fuels. If you want to affect your consumption of fossil fuels, you need to look at your transportation section.
I was just seeing something flash on the screen, something with Biden, and it was mentioning the American Petroleum Institute. All right, they have their supports. American Petroleum. Do we have lobby groups, to help us survive as a species and animals?
You don't.
And nature survive with our ecological collapse. They have the American Petroleum Institute. Yeah.
Yeah, they've always been there.
Oh.
And they've always known about climate change. They knew that since the 60s.
Right. That was really upsetting when I was looking at Kat's work as a biologist. It might have been his undergraduate work in the early 80s. I guess it was whenever you looked at it. This paper that he was citing in one of his reports on air pollution was a book called And just the name of the book was shocking because it was written in 1972, and it was the effects of pollution on climate change or whatever. It was looking at climate change in 1972 from the burning of our fossil fuels, and we knew about it. We knew about it. We were looking at it in 1970. Papers were being written about it, and so. What was that? 58. I was 14 years old, right? And we knew about it, and nobody was. And then I was saying that the hippies knew about it. We were fighting to after what was it? The book that was written on the nature and the pesticides. What is it called? That book? Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. And so we were, going back to the earth and growing our own food and co-ops and communes, everything that we really need to be doing now. We need to be doing that now. We do need to live more communally, more densely,
Yes.
More intergenerationally. We didn't think of that as a commune, but a lot of people, that was what happened in Tennessee, when they went onto the farm. The hippies that went there from San Francisco. Now they're living multi-generational and they're really taking care of each other. They love it. They're living that way. And we're seeing from what happened with COVID-19, how when we lock our seniors into these ghettos of just seniors, disease spreads. We know disease spreads.
Back up. What's happening at the farm
Right.
doesn't scale.
Well, no, why?
Every solution you can
Mhm.
come up with
Mhm.
only operates as a one-off.
Mm.
None of these things work at scale. You can develop a processing plant that will remove CO2 from the atmosphere and make it into a brick once.
Mhm.
None of these things scale.
Well, what Kat is saying, I don't know. I don't necessarily agree with him. I mean, what we're talking about is cooperation. And even that there's a philosopher, I forget his name, who said, cooperation will redeem mankind. And we're going to have to start cooperating and listening to the science and living it that way and helping each other. Even somebody was saying, there was some report that, I think it was in New Zealand or something, that they were having trouble where somebody was, they were doing tracing of the COVID and somebody lied about their, who they saw. And it was a real problem. And Ardern, whatever her first name is, Ardern, president of New Zealand, was saying, we've got to, don't think of it as, thinking on each other. We have to really tell the truth. And if you see that somebody's lying, we need to, call them out on that. Because what did she call it? Like, the 5 million of them that live in New Zealand are vulnerable. She talked about, we need to think about the 5 million. Think about us, as a group. And how we affect each other.
You're asking people not to be selfish. Well, I don't think that's a realistic expectation. People are going to be selfish and greedy. And the ones that are worse are the wealthy. That's how they got where they are.
Yes. Right. Oh, well. Yeah. Well, I guess, that's the images I see in my mind are the great iceberg that calved off and that is the size of New York. From, and that what Kat was explaining this morning, when these icebergs, they don't create sea level rise because they were in the ocean already. They were on the water already. So just like ice, they take up space just in their frozen, the volume is still there. Even as they sit on the water, they're creating the volume there of the ocean. So when they broke off, it was a iceberg. That was, I guess, what they're called icebergs when they're on the water too. They can be called iceberg. Where on the land they're called ice sheets. Is that the
No.
difference?
An ice sheet. Okay, a glacier is on land.
A glacier. Okay.
An ice sheet is a glacier that covers an entire landmass.
Okay.
Ice that is on water but still attached to land
Is iceberg.
is called an ice shelf.
Oh, ice shelf. Okay.
And then, when that ice shelf breaks and that water floats away and is no longer in contact with land, it's an iceberg.
Oh, okay. So we created an iceberg. It was the ice shelf
Yes.
that broke off.
Yes.
Right. It was the ice shelf in Antarctica that broke off, and now it's an iceberg. Basically, it's an iceberg, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, attached from the
It's a big one,
And-
but so qualified.
the size of New York. And the thing is that once you do that, once you take off, the ice shelf broke off and became an iceberg. It's called calving, like reproducing. And then Kat says that the glaciers, or what we call he called it the what do they call, well, the land-based ice, which is called glaciers. No, glaciers. Yeah, glaciers.
Glacier ice.
The glacier could move, and they do move,
Mm-hmm.
and they can more easily move when the ice shelf has been detached.
Yeah.
When the it's like a plug that was their connection to the water, and when the ice shelves are breaking off, then the glaciers can move, and that's when you get land-based ice into the ocean,
Entering the sea. Yeah.
entering the sea, and that's when you get sea level rise. And there's like so much ice on Antarctica. I mean, even this iceberg is now 500. I think it was 500 feet deep. Even that, it might be more, but it was at least 500 feet deep was the number.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what we're talking about. It was the size of New York. So we're destabilizing the Antarctica, right? Basically,
The cryosphere.
the cryosphere from a global heating, which is like, that's like, no duh. But, so I think that there's still a problem, with eating meat, and, and Kat says it's what is it called? It's, he calls it carbon neutral.
It should be.
It could be. Right now it's not, right? Because it's so much fossil fuels going into it. But even if we had that many cattle, that we would, I don't
can't.
think we could support it naturally,
can't.
right?
You can't have that many.
You couldn't have that many.
Everything you know now that's a
Right.
problem cannot go forward without fossil fuels.
naturally. Okay. So we couldn't be feeding us all. We've got to get
No,
with that kind of source, because
not gonna
it's
work.
not a sustainable source,
No,
right?
no.
And that's the problem.
And anything that cannot be sustained won't be. We're now entering an era where we're going to find out what cannot be sustained.
Right. Yeah. And sustainable means it can go on forever.
Yes. And we are now
Very limited about
having
what
to
can go
deal
on
with
forever.
what can go on forever. And it's a limited
It's a
menu.
very small, and we can look at our past to know what has helped us get to this place, and it is basics. That's how we used to be. We used to be very basic people: food, clothing, and shelter.
We were sustainable.
Right. That's why
Which
we're
place-
here. We're here at
places
8
limits.
billion.
Places limits on how.
Well,
No, we didn't
No,
get
no,
to
8
8
billion.
billion.
No, the sustainable.
sustainably.
No, we did not. We did not get to 8 billion.
When we were 250
Yeah.
million or 300
Yeah.
million, we were sustainable. But by the time we started heading into higher numbers, like 600 million, 800 million, 1,000 million, we were no longer sustainable.
Now we went from, let's just say, like we'll do it round numbers, 800 million, which is a little higher than we were, to how much are we now? 80?
8,000 million.
Only 8,000 million. So we went from, so that's to 10 times. That's what we said approximately, but it's more. It's maybe 15
It's more like
times.
20.
It's almost 20. Yeah,
Yeah.
20 from what we were, because it's really 400
Yeah.
million to
8,000 million.
8,000 million. Right. Yeah. So it's almost a 20 times. Is that
Yeah.
the numbers there? The math?
I think
Yeah.
at least 20.
Oh, a 20 times. And there's no animal. In that, how many years? In how many years? In 300 years, 300 years or so?
Maybe
150? 100 years?
maybe 400 years.
400? All right, yeah. And you're saying no other species has increased like that.
I don't think, well, unless you start getting into ants and beetles, there's not going to be 8,000 million of
Mammals,
anything.
of mammals, right?
Right.
Right. 800,000. No, is that no 800 million? Is 8 billion?
No, 800 million is 800 million.
How many millions are 8 billion?
When?
8 billion. How many millions?
When?
Now,
8,000 million.
8,000 million. Right. There is no animal on Earth, no mammal on Earth that is 8,000 million of them. We are down to like the last 800 of most species.
Yeah, well,
Wait, let's
the
say
natural world now makes up 4% of the biomass of animal life.
Right. And we're the rest.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you're talking about 96% of biomass is
It's
us.
us and our animals.
Okay, there we are. Us and our animals. Right.
The wild animal population is now down to 4% of the planet's biomass.
Right. So 800 million is 8 billion. 800 million?
No.
No, 8,000 million?
8,000.
8,000 million is 8 billion.
1,000 million is a billion.
Okay, 1,000 million is a billion. Okay. We're at 8,000 million
Yes.
humans. 8,000 million. Yeah. And there's no other species that has had 20 times, has flourished with 20 times the population of the animal.
Not
That
our
isn't-
size.
That isn't, well, not our size.
No animal our size.
Right. We've actually destroyed the habitats. We have destroyed all primates. The primates are like totally almost at extinction, right? All the
Yes.
primates.
Yeah.
Right. Who have lived a simple life. All they didn't even have clothing. They just had food. I mean, we are so fortunate we even have clothing. We lost we're the naked ape.
That's us.
Yeah. And even the food that we're getting when we take animals out of the wild, which is what happened in China, those animals are diseased already because of the environment. They're very, very stressed and diseased, Nothing in the wild is healthy anymore.
No.
We have destroyed the wilds. Through our building everywhere, right? Covering up nature.
Sure.
Making all these things to entertain ourselves and this and ballpark, covering up for nature.
Yep.
Paved paradise.
Yep.
And somebody was saying something about the world because, the world is copying us, They're trying to be like us and they're now going into these African reserves and everything, they're taking more. What was it that Prince Charles was saying? We need what was that R word? What's the R word he used? Reckoning. And then somebody else was saying that we needed, it needs to be a crime, ecocide. Ecocide needs to be a crime. And so
Not
maybe
when it's profitable.
Right. And so, even covering over 615 and making it into a home, into housing is ecocide to some degree because we're not letting it go back to nature, which we need to do and grow food. Now, Demetrius says we should have people living there too. And, maybe in a small footprint of people living there and then growing food. And she says
You
because
can make tiny houses associated with agriculture
right,
projects.
right. So that's what she was saying. Those that care for the land and grow the food would live there, and that is a smart way of doing it.
Mhm.
And that's why we need to create food production at all of our homes,
Mhm.
because it can be done fossil fuel free. It's just done at home. Nobody has to come to you. And that's the problem of having these landscapers come to our homes with their fossil fuel cars and machinery, and it's ridiculous. Everything we're doing is wrong, huh?
Pretty much.
All right, that's the word.
Everything's going to have to change. And it starts when they cut off the fossil fuels.
So we need to start. I mean, I was telling Demetrius that we could start a non-profit or something, and starting this, getting parents, paying the mothers to stay home and learn to grow food and prepare food and process food and excuse me, preserve food. All the things that we need to learn to do to live without fossil fuels. All of the, what is it called, the other arts, the other home arts, which is making clothes, which is, what is that? That's called
Textiles.
textiles and culinary textiles and textiles. Making our textiles. That means making your own clothes, not getting it from India and Pakistan and China, and right. That's all got to stop. That's how we used to do it. So Grandma Mary did it.
Uh-huh.
She she'd make her own beautiful quilts. She made her quilts. She quilted. All those beautiful arts that have gone away. So anyway, so we that's just something we could do. I guess it was just on the news. It flashed that the schools are opening. They came to an agreement. I don't know what an agreement is. They're giving them lots of money to go back. I don't know what they're doing.
They're agreeing to get coronavirus.
Oh, thank you. A lot of pressure is being put on the teachers. Like
Yes.
they're the problem.
Well, they're definitely standing in the way of progress,
Right.
so-called.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. That it was the truth. What was truth was what those politicians said.
School board.
The school board, right, in Northern California, and just in the Bay Area, North Bay, in the East Bay, I think it was. They said the parents want their daycare. They want their child care. And they want so that they can go enjoy. They'll do what they want to do, like smoke their pot or whatever it is they want to do. We're not being responsible, about our children. That's totally true. That's why our kids are so screwed up, and they're killing each other in the schools. And we want to get them back in there so they can get their lessons on active shooter, to take their active shooter classes. I need a refresher.
The idea is to get the kids out of the way of the parents.
That's right. Is that what you're saying?
Uh-huh.
I think so. And it used to be we needed each other to help each other survive. We did, and that was why the kids were there. A lot of times farm families were big because they needed help to raise to do all the work they took to survive, right?
Yep.
And we have to get back to that. We need our children, and if we don't teach them now how to do this, how can we say, 10 years we got to be off of fossil fuels? Even 30 years. That's a short amount of time, 30 years, right, honey? To be well, 0 is 30 years is 2050, which is the drop dead day. It is, and Kat is saying we don't have 30 years. So when are we going to start teaching ourselves to live without fossil fuels? When you don't have fossil fuels. What? When you don't have them. Right. When you don't have them, you're going to learn. And what? Oh, this is the key. This is something to remember. When the fossil fuels were turned off in Cuba because of Russia, some relationship with Russia, the gas was shut off. They learned to grow food. And they learned to preserve what they had, right? Everything they had, they fixed to save it. They didn't. It wasn't a throwaway society.
Nope.
They didn't have fossil fuels. They started growing food. Cuba. So we have to take that lesson. That's what it looks like when you don't have fossil fuels. You grow your own food, or you die. Right?
Well, there are people in America who would rather die,
Fine.
or maybe storm the Capitol building.
Yeah. Right. Kill the politicians like that, and then they'll get what they want. Their cars,
Well,
their
but
cows,
if
and their
the-
country.
But if the elites cut off the fossil fuels or make it so expensive that no one but elites can afford them, well, then you can storm the Capitol all you want to.
Mm-hmm.
The elites are not there. They're not listening. They don't care.
The elites are not at the Capitol.
They're not.
Yeah.
You don't know where they are.
Oh, so what are you saying? That the elites are the ones that are going to turn it
I'm
off?
saying
You've been
that
saying that the elites
The
will turn it
MAGA
off
hat, red hat crowd
Yeah.
thinks they're going to storm the Capitol and get what they want.
from the
But the
politicians.
problem is the politicians can't give them what they want. Politicians are not the elites.
That are really running the show. Is what you're saying, right?
Won't do you any good.
Yeah.
Storm the Capitol. Capture Nancy Pelosi.
Mhm.
Not going to do you any good. I mean, you'll have fun, and you'll make a point with your friends, but it's not going to change your situation.
All right. Thanks, Eddie. All right. Well, I guess I'm going to go out and do my gardening, growing food. I write my letters to the city and Google. I have to do that today. I'm going to do it today. Just say we don't need a hotel. We need food. And we need housing. And that's it. No hotels. We have to focus on our humongous crises. Iceberg. They call it an iceberg. Yeah, it's an iceberg. Oh, he's down. Flooding in Kentucky, honey. Look it up.
What?
Flooding in Kentucky.
What is it?
And that's really bad, all the flooding we're having.
Sure enough. West Virginia, too.
It hyposalinate. What, honey?
Heavy rains.
Heavy rains, global warming, global heating causing the global heating causes the. How would you say that? It
Sure it does.
Yeah.
The mechanism is always the same.
Right. It's the water cycle.
Yes. The waters, the oceans, and the other bodies of water.
Yeah. This is still on. I just turned this one off.
Hot water leads to more evaporation. More evaporation leads to more precipitation.
Right.
And that's all you need to know about that.
Wait, say it again. Hot air.
No,
Hot.
you weren't listening to me.
Okay, one more
Why
time.
do I answer your questions if you're not going to listen?
I'm sorry. I
to
just
me?
want to hear it one more time.
Hot water.
Water.
Hot ocean water leads to more evaporation. More evaporation leads to more precipitation someplace else.
Right. And so much of our heat that we generate from our CO2, the heat trapping gases, go into the oceans. And then that creates the water cycle. Right.
Correct.
And so we're having a lot of flooding. And this flooding is causing problems with our dolphins. They are living in a hyposalinated oceans because our oceans are becoming much more fresh water is going in from all the flooding. It's interesting, Kat, that when the oceans evaporate and then it precipitates, it's fresh water that comes out. Right? Because the water came from the ocean, but it was salty to begin with, right? And then it evaporates and it's fresh, then it comes down as fresh water, and then all this flooding. I wonder why I was just thinking, why does it get hyposalinated if it all came originally from, well, I guess we don't know if there's also a lot of melt. It's a lot of glacier melt, which is totally fresh water. Oh, I guess I've asked Kat that. You hear what I said, Kat? I guess all, the hyposalination of
I'll explain it if you care to listen.
Okay, from the dolphins.
Do you care to listen?
Yeah.
Really having a problem with allergy. So the water evaporates from the entire ocean. Sometimes the precipitation is also on the ocean, in which case it balances out. But a lot of the time, the precipitation is on land.
Mm-hmm.
From the land, it collects into the rivers, and the rivers then flow to the sea. The fresh water collects at the mouth of the rivers in the sea, and the shoreline of the ocean, not the depths of the ocean, just the shoreline becomes fresh water.
Mm-hmm.
So the hyposalinization you're talking about is not an effect of the entire ocean. It's an effect only of coastal or littoral water.
Right. But
That's where the dolphins are.
What I was saying is that if the ocean, and it evaporates and then it rains, well, shouldn't it be the same salination at that point because it came from the ocean? I
just said something. You didn't listen to me.
Okay.
The ocean evaporates. The entire ocean evaporates.
Right.
Sometimes that precipitation falls on the ocean, so it's all the same.
Right.
But a lot of the time, it falls on the land.
Right.
When it falls on the land, it then becomes concentrated on the shore, because that's where all the rivers empty into.
Oh, I see. So it's really the concentration of
Is
hyposalination at
actually
the
a coastal
shores.
phenomenon.
I see, where the
But that's where a
dolphins
lot of
live.
the dolphins are.
Right, I see. So we're intensifying the salination is being lowered at the shores because the rivers are bringing
The
in
rivers are
extra
dumping
water,
in.
and so much. It's the whole ocean of water is maybe now dropping all there in Virginia, and then these rivers are coming in,
Yes.
and it's very intensifying the
Hyposalination
hyposalination.
is a coastal effect.
Is a yeah, and we're having so much rains and flooding.
I'm frozen.
Oh, okay. Want to exercise?
No.
I was going to have you talk about our serious problem if you want to. Just, okay, well, I gotta shut that off. Okay, good, I'll do that. All right, 30-year-old House the House Republicans callously turned their backs on Americans in need. Yeah. Well, right. California schools deal made. Kids could be back in class in March. Anti-maskers protest outside a local Trader Joe's again. Once again, anti-maskers protest outside a California Trader Joe's. A group of anti-maskers with picket signs congregated outside of Trader Joe's in Santa Cruz to protest the city's mask mandate. Unlike the organization's earlier February demonstration in which they stormed into the grocery store and took food from the shelves while leaving cash at registers for cashiers who refused to serve them, this protest took place almost exclusively outside. This go around, a line of Trader Joe's employees guarded the entrances, prohibiting entry for the group of protesters while letting masked customers enter. Sunday, in fact, was originally known as National Maskless Day. The group regularly protests outside the city's farmers markets. It also offers free hugs. The Sentinel also reported that signs held up by the protesters read "Maskless Lives Matter" and "Enforce Love." The collective reportedly heckled masked shoppers, with one asking a customer if they were wearing a jockstrap. Trader Joe's did not immediately respond. Officers did not cite or arrest any of the protesters seen in their vehicle, but were seen in their vehicles. Santa Cruz police did not immediately respond. Spate of anti-mask protesters who allegedly fired after asking more stringent safety measures. Chevy's in Vallejo defies COVID-19 orders, continues outdoor dining. Keep outdoor dining open. The Vallejo location of restaurant chain Chevy's is defying COVID-19 order to keep outdoor dining open. The restaurant is now under investigation. The Times, however, found 10 sit-down diners seated outdoors under a tent at Chevy's and photographed it. Following statement in response to the violation, we are aware of the current order issued by the state. Conflict in direction between the state, county, and city levels. Some of it has been lifted to serve guests in person despite the stay-at-home order. The government has to do what it needs to do to protect people and make sure they stay healthy. Think about the business and think about the deeper impact of shutdown is going to have on people long term. Okay, that's the thing that they're saying. They want their jobs back.